Welcome to the Nerdom of God Podcast. This is John Franks.
And Joey Ward.
This actually is your first time with us. There is no probably about it. And just want to let you know, we are two cousins who decided just to get online, and we are prideful and arrogant enough to think that you're going to want to hear our conversation about nerd stuff. So we hope that you enjoy this. And this is got started because of a blog that I and Joey started together. And anyways, so we did this just because we wanted to connect two things in our life that we really love, one more than the other. First and foremost, Jesus Christ, and the second, just all sorts of the nerdy stuff that we love, the dorky stuff that we love, fantasy, science fiction. Being a nerd is just being a passionate love about something, and that's really what we want to display, both for our Savior and for some of the cultural stuff in our life that brings us joy.
Yeah, so don't be surprised if while listening to this podcast you may hear a lot of things, spiritual type things that are interweaved in our conversation and things we may think about. Also, we're both pretty scatterbrained, so who knows where this thing might go. We love movies, we love video games, we love nerdy type stuff, and so we're looking forward to just sitting down, and hopefully we'll make more than one of these. It depends on how many negative people talk about it, but we're pretty stoked just to throw our ideas on the internet.
So if you're going to leave us any criticism, make sure it's constructive and not destructive, because that's what Jesus would want, and that's what Luke Skywalker wanted and Yoda would want. They were all about the positive instruction. So hopefully you understand that. And we just want to introduce ourselves real quick. I'm John Franks, and as you heard before, this was Joey Ward, and we still are cousins. It's not just that we were cousins. And we grew up right down the road from each other, and we are not only cousins, but we're real close friends. And what kind of became our bonding moment was our love of nerdy stuff. Joey actually wasn't a nerd before my dad got a hold of him, and because they came over all the time, my dad introduced him to Star Wars and Star Trek and some other stuff. He'd already been introduced to comic books a little bit because of our Uncle David, which, it was all Marvel. It wasn't any DC stuff.
Yeah.
And so, Joey, why don't you tell the audience, the listening people, how nerddom has changed your life since you weren't born into it?
Well, it's kind of interesting for me because growing up not really considering myself a nerd until probably my later teens, at least mid-teens, it was kind of weird because grew up, even though we were really close to each other, totally different worlds in the sense that grew up with animals and livestock around me, and we had a TV and we had like 2 channels and no video game consoles, and might have had a VCR. I want to say one existed, but the movies we probably had were westerns. So it wasn't till going down to y'all's house and getting to play with toys and video games and watch movies that I'd never seen before. And as you all know, your dad, my Uncle Doug, huge Star Trek guy, read probably every Star Wars book and Star Trek book that's been written to my knowledge, and it's kind of interesting because going down there, getting to see that and getting to feel comfortable and safe to enjoy it was pretty awesome. And so although like in school, like big into sports and things like that, I always had like this nagging nerdom that seemed to take hold. And so as I got older, it was really funny to see how that has developed into now a passionate love for comic books, for sci-fi, for fantasy, for video games, for particularly Star Wars. And so our mutual love for Jesus and these type of things have led to many interesting conversations, and we thought it'd be cool to record some of these.
And Joey, do you remember the first Star Wars toy that my dad ever gave you? This is really random, but I just want to see if you remember.
I don't. I do remember a mouse pad with Episode 1 Naboo fighters on it. I remember that vividly. It may still be at my childhood home, but I do not remember the first toy, no.
Dad got me and you both matching snow speeders. They were like expanded universe snow speeders to where you'd hit the button in the back and the wings would pop up.
Yeah, okay.
You remember?
Wow.
Do you remember those?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I do remember those.
Yeah, Dad found them on sale and got them for both of us. And so that was Joey's first Star Wars story for any of those of you keeping track and trying to trace Joey's history, which would be creepy. So we're talking today, and kind of the way, and hope this is going to be changing, but the basic layout of the show, kind of every time we do it, which right now is going to be kind of hard for us because Joey is crazy busy, as am I. I'm newly married, just over 2 months, and I'm a school teacher, and she's working on her becoming a school teacher. And Joey is a worldwide traveler,
What?
Yeah, and so he's always out doing stuff, and so we're gonna try to make this more regular. But right now, just schedules are crazy, and so if you really like this, just kind of hold on, and we'll let you know. But kind of the basic layout of the show is going to be like this: is that first of all, we're going to open up the podcast with a random nerd news or fact. Like this time around, we're talking about Simon Pegg's confirmation that he is going to have a cameo in the new Star Wars movie, and we're just going to talk about cameos. We're going to talk about Simon Pegg and just kind of talk about that for a little bit. And then every week we're going to have what we're calling a trilogy of the day, which is going to be a list of 3 or more things. Basically, we're going to have a list and ranking things. And this time around, this podcast is going to be the greatest science fiction battles in all of nerddom history. And then we'll move on after we get done talking about those and discussing those into a topic of discussion, which this time around is just really something real simple, is our hopes and dreams and aspirations and fears about Episode 7. And hopefully J.J. Abrams will not be known as Jar Jar Abrams after this. Hopefully it'll be really good, and we'll have something that we can really take pride in as Star Wars fans and as nerds. And so that's going to kind of be the layout. And so I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to let Joey kind of jump in about what he thinks about the Simon Pegg cameo in Star Wars and what he feels about that. And I'm going to let him lead that discussion, and then we'll just kick it back and forth.
It is funny that you mentioned the Jar Jar Abrams, because I did see a tweet the other day that did make me kind of laugh, thinking, like, if he screws this up, like, he did Star Trek well. I can't say anything bad about Star Trek 1 and 2. They were fun movies for what they were. They were awesome. If he blows this, like, he may have to, like, move to Switzerland and just stay there until he dies or something, because I don't see his career coming back. As far as Simon Pegg's cameo in Episode 7, pretty stoked. Honestly, it may be like Peter Jackson in the Hobbit movies or Lord of the Rings films. We may not even catch it. We may not even see all of them or notice where he is, but just knowing that, like, I feel like he's a representative for nerds, because he's played in all these awesome movies, and he is unashamed to just speak loudly that he's a huge Star Wars fan. And so I remember in the video it said they're in the desert. He's wearing this giant suit. There's no telling who he's playing, but he says, I would burn for Star Wars. And that's just something kind of awesome. And I think something that we would all agree with, those that are passionate about, these type of things, is that, yeah, like, if we got the chance, you see people who are passionate about The Walking Dead, when the extras that are zombies, they have to go through this grueling makeup process. They have to deal with all of this stuff just to have 5 seconds on screen because they're passionate about the show. Pretty fantastic that Simon Pegg gets to actually live out that dream that all of us seem to have. I mean, oh my gosh, I would clean C-3PO's boots if it meant I could just hang out on that set. It would have just been crazy.
And what's interesting though is that we see a lot of celebrities, and it's become more and more as being a nerd has kind of become more socially acceptable. Is that we see celebrities a lot more kind of professional level. Like, for instance, best example outside of Simon Pegg is probably Stephen Colbert. And did you know he had a cameo in The Hobbit?
Yeah. I forget where it's in. Lake Town?
Yeah. And he's just this brief dude. He's got, like, I think, a wart on or like some sort of prosthetic on. He's under this really ugly looking hood, and he like just turns to the camera, then turns away. Just the idea that small of a thing, just to say that you were a part of it, I think is a crazy thing. And cameos are a great way of doing that. And I think cameos are a great way of showing nerds, showing their love for what they're a cameo of. But also, I like how sometimes when filmmakers do homages to the stuff that's inspired them. Like, for instance, the R2-D2 that was in both Star Trek movies during the space scenes, how it floated across the way. Did you know about that?
No, I did not.
Yeah,
now I want to go back and watch.
If you watch closely in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies, twice not Jar Jar Binks.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, no, yeah. I would love for him to be floating in space, dead and frozen. I know I should let it go. That's my only pun for Frozen this entire podcast. I'm sorry. But anyways, the whole idea that he's able to sneak something in that's Star Wars into a Star Trek movie is just really cool. And I like when filmmakers do homages to the stuff that they love and they throw that in there. And there's in nerddom more than anything else, there's this kind of shared ownership. Even if you weren't a fan of something, I think that if you're a good nerd and a kind nerd, if you're a Jesus-like nerd, let's even say it that far, you respect other people's fandom. You respect other people's obsession, and you kind of understand where that comes from, because it's really something that inspires you and kind of takes you to a new place and a new world. And I'm really hoping that Simon Pegg's cameo is something along the lines of like a Jabba's palace type scene, to where something like that, to where he's in the background and he's prominently displayed, but he isn't distracting from the rest of the film.
Oh, definitely, yeah. That's what I want. I want something you see, and maybe even if you don't know it's him, you know that like when you maybe rewatch it again, once you find out, oh, that was Simon Pegg, that you get to actually enjoy it, and it's not just that kind of quick glimpse. Like if he gets to sort of revel in that world a little bit, I think that's going to be really, really cool to see, especially for all us nerds. Because then when I watch it again, I'll be like, there he is.
I don't want it to be distracting. Like, I don't want during that scene, I want to be able to say, oh, that's him, that's really cool, and then get right back into what's going on. Which he's done this before. In case you don't know this, Simon Pegg actually has done cameos before. Like, he did Shaun of the Dead, which was wonderful. The Blood and Ice Cream trilogy is absolutely wonderful.
Great film. All three of them, awesome movies.
Yeah, they're great. But like him and Nick Frost both have a cameo in a George A. Romero movie. Did you know this?
No.
In Land of the Dead, which I've never seen, but I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never seen the whole film. Him and Nick Frost are actually chained up in a bar as zombies. And like the whole idea is that it's like set to where zombies are kind of an everyday part of life, and they're used as commodities almost. And like people will come up and take pictures with them, like selfies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they'll have like autographed pictures taken with these zombies, and it's Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, the two zombies that are chained up, and they basically got a hold of George Romero and said, hey, we want to be in one of your films, and that's where he put them. And so like he's used to being in the cameo spotlight. And by the way, do you feel like Nick Frost is just like a cool uncle? Like, do you feel like that's his vibe going on?
I feel like he doesn't belong in movies. I think he's brilliant, but I think it's like he was just a friend of a friend who wandered on set and was just funny, and and they were just like, let's just leave him in there. And then because everything that he says, like I'll listen to him in interviews. He did that Cuban Fever movie where he was like a salsa dancer. Like it's just like, did he just wander into a dance studio and someone caught it on film and like, we need like a movie out of this? But yeah, no, dude's fantastic. But yeah, he can definitely be kind of that uncle that's just sort of there.
Like adds to it. Like I feel like Nick Frost is the uncle to where if you show up to Christmas and he's not there, it's kind of like a letdown, but it doesn't ruin the whole Christmas.
I feel you.
Like I feel like he's cumin. Like salt and pepper are necessary, but cumin is just a little extra. And if it's not there, like oh well, okay. But if it is there, like oh it's there, that's cool. Which again, fat guy, skinny guy, bringing them back to food. It's always about food or Jesus in the end, guys. That's just how it is, because he is the bread of life. And so, bread. And so, do you have anything else to add about Simon Pegg before we move on?
Just that he's awesome, and he was great in the Rogue Nation Mission Impossible movie.
Not seen it.
Oh, wow. He dies.
Why are you telling me this?
Oh, yeah, we should probably go ahead and say that this is... Okay, he doesn't die. Or does he? But this podcast will probably be full of spoilers, so it's not our fault. This is your disclaimer. There's a good chance something may be spoiled for you. So yeah, in The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis is dead the whole time in your face.
There's that. Also, we'll try not to spoil stuff that comes out like within like a month. But after a month or two, especially if it's a major release that's in the Nerdom world, we will. The internet's already spoiled it for you. Let's be honest, and we're just helping out because I guess but we're a podcast, so I guess we're part of the internet. But you've probably read it or saw it on Screen Junkies or something like that, or Screen Rant about this, and so or Cinema Blend or some other or IMDb or whatever. And so we'll try not to spoil anything that's like brand spanking new that we've seen. But like if it's several months old, several years old, there is no hope for you. And so turn back now or enter in despair. And so going on to the next one. Actually, real quick. Favorite Simon Pegg moment? Like, favorite moment from a movie with Simon Pegg?
Oh, ever? Oh, that's tough. Probably gonna land on Hot Fuzz, and I think it's just gonna be whenever, I know it's kind of dumb, but there's a scene where he's in the grocery store and he sees the guy, like, shoving chips down his pants, and he goes, and it's 2 actually, and it's just hilarious because he stares the guy down, and there's like a 10-second like stare down where like, what are you gonna do? And the guy just takes off running, and he like whips his hat off and he sprints out, and then you see Nick Frost like reading a Jackie Chan movie while Simon Pegg's character just runs outside chasing this guy. It's brilliant. Like if you see it, it's hilarious. But later in the movie, whenever there's that giant guy who's like slow, and he's asked a question, and Simon Pegg's impersonating him, and the whole movie all he has said is "yarp," and that's like the affirmation of any questions he's asked. Finally, it's like he gets asked a no question, and Simon Pegg's face, he goes, "Narp," like question mark narp, and oh my gosh, I lose it every time.
It's Hot Fuzz is wonderful, but I still have to go back to Shaun of the Dead because Shaun of the Dead was just so cool for me. Because first it introduced me to Simon Pegg, and also I hadn't watched a lot of horror comedy before that. So Shaun of the Dead was kind of my first introduction to that whole world. But like my favorite Shaun of the Dead moment is because it's just typical. My favorite Simon Pegg moment in Shaun of the Dead is just typical kind of Simon Pegg. Is when they're in the Winchester at the bar and the zombies are coming in. And the Queen song starts playing, "Don't Stop Me Now."
Yeah.
Starts playing, and they all start beating the guy with pool cues to the beat.
Like rhythmically whacking it.
Because like it's so British and it's so nerdy, and like it just pays so much homage. Like of course the whole movie's a homage to the zombie genre, and then the whole idea of having Queen be playing in England, which is ironic to say itself, and then just that whole concept is just hilarious to me. And I feel like it's probably just Shaun of the Dead as a general is probably my favorite like Simon Pegg moment, which I know it's kind of a cop out, but just specifically that scene, I feel like just kind of sums up the vibe of the whole movie because it's very unexpected, but once it happens, like it fits, it fits just fine. And so we're going on to our trilogy of the day, which is this time is the top 3 greatest sci-fi battles of all time. And we're probably going to miss a whole bunch because Nerdom just covers so much that we probably haven't seen some of it. But so just don't get angry at us. If you have any suggestions, leave them in a comment or just let us know in some form or fashion.
Go ahead and get to the trilogy. We're going to quickly list each of our top 3 going 3, 2, 1, and then we'll just discuss it a little bit about why they are our favorites. I'll go first. As far as battles, type scenes, and sci-fi, fantasy type movies, mine is number 3 is the opening scene of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie. It is the final scene of Serenity, Joss Whedon's movie. And then because it's my go-to, like if I don't feel good, if I'm sick, if I'm happy, it doesn't matter. My ecstasy movie is Empire Strikes Back, and the Battle of Hoth is by far my number 1.
Did I hear you say that you do ecstasy? Number 3 for me is Independence Day. Is just the fighter battle at the end because it combines 2 boyhood loves. Up until the age of 12, I hate to admit this, but my dream was to become a fighter pilot like Maverick and Top Gun. And then also I loved aliens and stuff, and so Independence Day kind of met those 2 things because like Bill Pullman was who I wanted to be. Like I wanted to be president and a fighter pilot who fought aliens. Like that. If that's not your kid's dream, you're doing parenting wrong. And so that's what I want to be. And also, Independence Day was, as Joey said, Empire Strikes Back was his sick movie. My sick movie was Independence Day. If I woke up in the middle of the night with a stomach ache or wasn't feeling good, I put in Independence Day and just watched it because it just made me feel good. And so that's number 3 for me is that whole battle at the end of Independence Day. Number 2 is The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek, the Star Trek original trilogy, or the original Star Trek movies. Number 2, Wrath of Khan, the space battles in those, which are wonderful. And then number 1, it's a tie, and I know it's a cop out, but you have to understand that they're both Star Wars. It's the opening of A New Hope and the final space battle of the second Death Star and Return of the Jedi are my two that are tied for number 1. So, Joey, explain to us why you picked your number 3 as your number 3.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I didn't get into Star Trek until late. So I got into Star Trek due to an injury that left me bedridden for like 6 weeks in, 2007-ish. And all of a sudden, I realized that there's this new Star Trek movie being made. And because I was bedridden and couldn't do anything, I remember asking you, hey, I need like something to watch. And your dad owns like every original '60s Star Trek show on VHS, and they all came out on like hour-long VHSs, and all the original movies. So I watched those high on hydrocodones because of my injury, and loved every second of it. Fell in love with Star Trek in the sense that William Shatner, I felt like him and I became pretty close during those, because I mean my sleep patterns were off, so it'd be 3 a.m. and I'd just be like, God! So it was living the life. So when I knew there was this new movie coming out, pretty stoked about it. And the fact that like you and I planned on seeing it together forever in our hometown's dumpy little theater, which does no movie justice ever, except maybe the Twilight movies. But the fact that that opening scene, it and we've spoken about this before, it set the visual tone for what modern day sci-fi movies would be about.
I couldn't see for a solid hour and a half after the first opening scene from the new Star Trek.
Okay, so granted, J.J. Abrams may have an affinity for lens flares, and let's face it, in the new Star Wars with lightsabers everywhere, like there's a good chance we won't be able to see about 30% of this movie because of all of the brightness. But it was a gorgeous movie. Like the sets felt practical, they felt real. It was something that we didn't quite get from the prequels, that sort of practical sense. And so getting into this new Star Trek, it was just a gorgeous movie. And there's like that heroism that we see right at the beginning with Chris Hemsworth's character before he became Thor, when the Romulans were attacking and destroying the ship. And there's even a line at the end of the movie, or maybe towards the middle, I forget, but it's where Captain Pike is like, your father was a captain for 12 minutes and saved 800 lives. Let's see if you can do better type mindset. And so like there was just this sense of just grand scale, gorgeous sets, and a sense of film that we just hadn't got that. And I feel like J.J. Abrams ushered in a lot of good movies because of his success with Star Trek. What's your number 3? Let's go back and forth.
Number 3 for me is Independence Day, and it's the battle that over Area 51, to where the aliens are finally coming off to finish off what's left of the human resistance and all those other things. And you know something works when it takes and puts Randy Quaid as a hero, and you totally buy it. And it took me forever. Funny story about that final battle scene. When Randy Quaid flies his jet into the weapon of the spaceship from the aliens,
the sphincter of the spaceship,
basically gives the spaceship an enema. When he's doing that, like as a kid, I didn't understand. In the words of my generation, "Up yours." I didn't understand it till later, and now I find it as the funniest part of the entire film. Is just waiting for that line. Is, in the words of my generation, "Up yours." To me, should be a rallying cry for anybody that doesn't like the system. Is that, and I just thought it was cool because that story is actually there's a lot of redemption in it. Like Randy Quaid's a drunk, and the funniest part of one of the funniest parts of the entire film is when he crop dusts the wrong field,
yeah.
And his son tracks him down on his motorcycle and calls him an idiot. I think that's one of the funniest parts of the film. But the final scene is just so cool because Bill Pullman, not to be confused with Bill Paxton, I used to do it all the time. Bill Pullman is just on point, and like his speech that he gives at the end is probably one of the greatest speeches. Like if a president gave that speech today, like everyone would be united. Republicans and the Democrats would like hold hands and hug each other, and there would be peace and harmony. But no one can give that type of speech in real life, and so.
When the aliens invade, we'll see what Obama has up his sleeve.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hope Trump isn't president because he'll just tell them to get back to wherever they come from and we're going to build a wall. But
he'll say, yeah, pretty bad. Are we allowed to cuss on the podcast?
I
better not. So Trump will say choice words towards the aliens.
Exactly, and claim that they're all rapists or murderers.
But then his head piece will pop up and we'll see there was an alien side of him the whole time.
Yeah, Trump's hairpiece actually is just the cover for the control center for the tiny alien that's controlling his
like
android body.
The little thing just pops up and there he is.
Exactly. By the way, Men in Black is wonderful. It's an absolutely wonderful. Those are wonderful films.
Oh, the first one's like Tommy Lee Jones, Will Smith, top show.
Yeah, definitely. So that's number 3 for me is Independence Day, just because like it combined my favorite things being fighter pilots and aliens and like all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then like also the prototypical Jewish dad as he's praying down below Jeff Goldblum's dad is just funny. just the idea that kind of shows everybody coming together. It's just a really cool thing.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with my number 2. Mine would be at the very end of Serenity, which is a film I know you haven't seen, so I'm going to try not to spoil anything. But essentially, like, if you've not seen Serenity, go watch Serenity. It's a great movie. You're not going to like it, despite if you like sci-fi movies or not. It's just great. If you like the Avengers movies, it's made by the same director, Joss Whedon, and he's just fantastic. But in Serenity, the final scene, basically, they're being chased by the government, and then they're being chased by this zombie space race, the Reavers, and they're kind of stuck between the two, and they're coming, like, both are coming in on them. So basically what Serenity, the ship that they choose to do, is they pick a fight with the Reavers to then draw them to the Alliance. And it's just this, the reason I love it so much is because I just love, it's a wonderful end to the movie as it's coming to a close. But Alan Tudyk's character Wash is the pilot, and he's just awesome and hilarious in everything he does. But he's like trying to keep his zen during the battle where he's flying between like this zombie space race, and he's flying between the Alliance that are trying to get him, and he says, "I'm a leaf on the wind," and then he's flying, and then like the captain's just like, "What does that even mean?" And he was just like, "It's okay, I'm a leaf on the wind." Like, it's like this sense of like urgency and trying to keep his tranquility. It's just gorgeous for one. It's hilarious, and I'm not gonna tell you how it ends, but it hits you right in the feels when the battle's over.
Speaking of what's his name? The pilot from Serenity.
Alan Tudyk?
Yeah, Alan Tudyk. Which I've watched Firefly before, and so I like all the characters. And Nathan Fillion, guys, Nathan Fillion's amazing. Just just kind of a demigod inside of nerd circles because he just is a nerd himself.
Oh yeah, he's a nerd. Castle, if you've seen everything.
And then what's his name again? Crap, Alan
Tudyk.
Alan Tudyk. Okay, I'm sorry, Alan Tudyk. Have you seen Tucker and Dale vs. Evil?
I have.
Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is wonderful. If you haven't seen that film, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome.
Well, even him in the Transformers movie, what was it, 2 or 3, where he's like the bodyguard.
Yeah.
And it's just hilarious. Like every scene he's in, he's great. He's a scene stealer for sure.
Well, like him in a Night Still also. People forget about him being in that.
Yeah,
it's
great.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I will turn your entrails into your extrails. Like
fong you. Yeah.
I will fong you.
Yeah, it's called Alliance. Hello. No, he's great. He's great. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is the USS Reliant versus the Enterprise in Star Trek, the original movies. Number 2, The Wrath of Khan. Great, like just classic sci-fi movie. Even if you aren't a Star Trek fan, like it's just a good film all the way around. Chekhov gets a scorpion put in his ear, basically a space scorpion, which those are the worst type. If you don't know anything about scorpions, the worst type of scorpions are space scorpions. But like it's a great film because the space battles between the two ships, like the final, like all of them are full of surprise, and like it's very, and I hate to like be like all historical, but I'm a history teacher, so that's kind of what I do. It's almost like old school submarine warfare. It's kind of the way it was set up to like the sonars and you're running quiet. Like that's kind of the vibe that you get. Like in case you've never seen it, the final battle between the two ships is Kirk goes into a nebula, and basically Khan, who's in the USS Reliant, follows behind him, and Spock points out the fact that Khan since he comes from the past, is used to thinking in 2-dimensional space. And so Kirk like lowers the ship, runs silent, and comes up behind him, and completely destroys Khan's ship. But what's really horrible about the film is just the ending. Like you get this really big rush of exhilaration, and then Spock does the ultimate sacrifice at the end, and which is really horrible, and it kind of rips your heart out when you see it for the first time, because we could all agree that just in Star Trek and in life, Spock was a much better person than Kirk, and Leonard Nimoy. I love Bill Shatner, but Leonard Nimoy was just like a treasure, like just as a person. Like if you never got to like hear interviews with Leonard Nimoy, just like a really nice person and a really good person. And Bill Shatner is too. I don't mean that in a bad way, but just comparing the two, like Leonard Nimoy is a better person, and Spock in Wrath of Khan is the better man out of the two. And I think that's a cool thing. And so both of our number twos kind of the punch at the end is what makes it kind of worth everything. And in your number 3 also is the punch at the end.
Sure.
Kind of makes it. So that's what I had for number 2. So I'll let you say your number 1 and then.
My number 1 is the Battle of Hoth on Empire Strikes Back. It's just for one a phenomenal scene. Empire Strikes Back is by far my favorite Star Wars. I mean, it's possibly my favorite movie of all time. I just love it so much. And the Battle of Hoth is fantastic because you kind of see. I mean, yeah, Luke destroyed the Death Star in A New Hope. Spoiler. But I feel like in the Empire Strikes Back, you see him kind of come into his own right after Han had just saved him and stuff. And so you really kind of see him develop as a character, as a leader. In the Battle of Hoth, you see Darth Vader front and center, and there's Han and Leia and Chewbacca. Like there's so many dynamics that are happening during that scene, and you're introduced to AT-ATs, which is just awesome. I remember playing the video games on Nintendo 64, and they were just crazy fun trying to take them down. The snow speeders, just everything about the battle is really cool. The scale of it, the scope of it, it's awesome. And then you just really see it's kind of like a growing point for Leia and Han's relationship. So like in the middle of this battle, in the middle of destruction, like you see a lot of care being taken by both of them. Then you see Leia's like heart coming forward, talking about get to your shuttles, about the guys that are kind of staying behind. So it's just fantastic. Honestly, any conflict in Empire Strikes Back can be my favorite because it's my favorite movie. But what's yours?
Well, just a little about Empire Strikes Back, because if it's about Star Wars, I have to talk about it. You said that you see Luke Skywalker coming to his own, but also I think you kind of touched on it, you get to see the actors coming to their own in their roles. But like Luke, I think Mark Hamill more than anybody else comes into his own as an actor, because in an interview with him, he said that his role, the role for actors, when he's on Dagobah, is simply it's him and it's Frank Oz controlling Yoda, and being muffled underneath the set that they set up, and then like it tells like how many snakes, how many reptiles, how many lizards, how many birds need to be put in there, and it's just him and the production crew, and then Frank Oz underneath the set controlling Yoda, and he's the only one there, and he completely sells it, the fact that he is with Aiden.
Yeah, he carries it all.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool thing how he came to his own for that. And so my number 1, it's a tie, and I know I kind of copped out on that, which I'll probably do a lot in this podcast because I'm horrible at making decisions. But it ties an opening of A New Hope and the final space battle in Return of the Jedi. And there's a bunch of different reasons why. First of all, the Return of the New Hope, not Return of the New Hope. A New Hope is kind of interesting. What's very interesting, it's my favorite Star Wars film. As a matter of fact, between the three of us, me and Joey, and then we had a real good friend named Michael Bruce, who we all separated. Mine was A New Hope, Joey's was Empire Strikes Back, and Michael Bruce's, for some reason, was Return of the Jedi. By the way, Return of the Jedi is the closest the original trilogy comes to being the prequels, just in scope and kind of attitude. But
let's not forget, though, I mean, Leia in the metal bikini was probably why it was his favorite.
Well, true. Okay, we were teenage boys. Leave us alone. The opening of A New Hope, it just sets the tone for the entire series in general. And also, like, I remember the first time seeing, like, I saw it at home because we had it on VHS. That's when Dad showed it to me. But when they re-released them with the new stuff, which, granted, has just part of it's good stuff and part of it's bad stuff. But when they re-released them in the late 90s, in like 97 or whatever it was, I got to see it for the first time in the theater, and you felt the terror because the blockade runner, the Tantive 4, rolls over, and you're like, that's a huge ship, and then the Star Destroyer rumbles over, and you're like, holy crap. And just that opening scene, and then and it's very, very short, the actual space battle of it, but like you get introduced to the tone of the film, you get introduced to R2-D2 and C-3PO very quickly, and you kind of have that comedic breakthrough when, this is madness.
Yeah. The scope, too.
Yeah.
You're in space. And so, there's movies that had came before that, but, I mean, I agree in the fact that A New Hope really opened the door to kind of what was going to be possible for a lot of filmmakers to make. Where before, like, if you look at movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey and things, they were phenomenal, but they were one-offs almost. And then because of the technology that they developed, George Lucas and his team developed, all of a sudden we have this whole new world that we're brought into in the scope of space and battles, and yeah, fantastic. But yeah, go ahead with Return of the Jedi.
Also, one thing about that is Steven Spielberg is quoted as saying that George Lucas with Star Wars put the popcorn back in movies. Just this attitude of it being over the top and fun and everything else. And regardless of how bad George screwed up towards the end of his run with Star Wars, the idea is that he's still the creator of this gigantic universe, and there's something to be said about a creator of a universe, whether it be God himself or George. I'm not saying they're on the same level, but there has to be a sign of respect there for the fact that it came from his brain, and he also allowed people to kind of play in his sandbox a little bit with a lot of stuff, especially with the expanded universe, which, rest in peace, by the way. I love the expanded universe. That's the one up I had on a lot of people, is because me and Dad were huge into the expanded universe, especially post Jedi, about all that. So it just set up all the stuff. It set up Darth Vader, like when Darth Vader steps in with the white hallway and the troopers, and he steps in. It's just a wonderful, wonderful part of the film. But with Return of the Jedi, the space battle is wonderful. Like, it's well done. Like, I believe that Admiral Akbar is a military strategist and a genius, basically, like he's portrayed in the expanded universe. Rest in peace. I believe that. I believe that he's in control. I believe that Mon Mothma is a leader of the rebellion. I believe that Lando has turned into a commander. I believe all this stuff, and the stakes are high because you take that space battle, and then it helps put a context of what's going on, because it's literally just the boiling point of the entire series. You've got the conflict between the Emperor Vader and Luke going on inside the second Death Star. You've got Han and Leia and Chewbacca and C-3PO and R2-D2 on the ground, and they're it's just this. All of this boils over at the same time, and I just remember being a kid and I'm almost on the edge of my seat, like hooping and hollering when I see it as a kid, and I still am today. But it's just a wonderful scene because it's well spaced. It has enough big ships to keep it interesting, but then you're focusing on the Falcon, the B wings and the A wings and the X wings and the Y wings and all the other wings that are involved, the TIE fighters and the interceptors, and also we get introduced to like a buttload of new ships. And that's what's really cool about Star Wars, that regardless of characters, you get introduced to new ships. Like the A wings come about in Return of the Jedi, the B wings come about, the TIE interceptors come about.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's all around pretty cool. I mean, it's a wonderful space battle, a wonderful science fiction type of battle, and I just love it to death.
I feel you. I feel like to proceed with things, I want to quickly mention an honorable mention of mine is it's probably going to be, we're sticking with Star Wars because Star Wars is the theme, but the first scene in Revenge of the Sith, which in a way I feel is like a callback to A New Hope, and that like it opens up, and if you remember, there's like I forget how long it is, but they're tracking the Jedi starships, and they're just like, it's almost silent in a way, and they're tracking over the battle and the ship, and all of a sudden we zone in and we're on Anakin and Obi-Wan's conversation. But I remember watching that in theaters. We watched the midnight premiere, me and you, and it was just gorgeous. It was just, I mean, oh my gosh, like, yeah, it's a little campy, and sure, there's some awkward, funny moments in it that maybe wouldn't happen in a battle, but at the end of the day, what was pretty tight about it was just the fact that you sort of seen the personalities of the characters opening up. You see the kind of the scope of that battle, and you also sort of see the wear and tear that it had taken on. If Revenge of the Sith was a better movie, it probably would have made it into my top 3. But I do feel like that was an honorable mention, that first scene in Revenge of the Sith.
And I agree, and it actually made it my honorable mention too. And the reason what kept it out was what keeps a lot of really good parts of the prequels out is the campy humor, like for instance the Buzz droids and all their other stuff. That really kind of it just ticks me off because it kind of takes away from the seriousness of the battle. Like there's a difference in having like funny conversation and people cracking jokes in the middle of things, because like that happens when people get nervous or scared. Sometimes they do make jokes.
Sure.
But to have the like quote unquote physical comedy, which is green screen and computer generated, so it's not really physical comedy, but having physical comedy in the middle of the battle, like It feels like you're working two ends against itself.
Yeah.
And so I put that as my honorable mention too. Anyways, so we're going to move on to our topic of the day, which our topic of the day is just episode 7. And we're just going to kind of fire some things back and forth in a real quick conversation. And we're going to connect it back around to some deeper spiritual issues we feel like need to happen because that's kind of our thing. And so, Joey, what is your greatest hope for episode 7? Like, what are you expecting? Like, on your best positive day without any cynicism, what are you expecting and what are you wanting out of episode 7?
I think easily answered is just redemption. Would be a good way to put it. Redemption meaning the prequels, they have their faults for sure. Yeah, there's things about them that I absolutely adore. There's things about the Phantom Menace that you can't take away from me because I just remember watching it as a kid and enjoying it so much. But I think I feel like with J.J. Abrams, we're in good hands, and not only that we're in good hands, but he gets it. He's a fanboy. He cares. He wants to see another good Star Wars movie. And I feel like Disney has given them the reins and the finances and the ability to do this. And I'm excited. Biggest hopes, lots of awesome characters that we care about, a feeling of like reality that it's real, that it's set in a real place, and that we're getting to experience this. And this could have happened in a galaxy far, far away. So I feel like probably my biggest hope is just that. A sense of genuineness and sincerity with the world, with the characters, and with the story. And I mean, from there, I don't care what happens, because as soon as I care about these characters, no matter what ride we get taken on, I'm strapped in and ready to do it.
And I would agree with that too. I want the grittiness back. Like when you went to Tatooine in episode 4, like it's horrible. Like Luke, you agree with Luke, is that he is, if there's a bright point in the universe, this is the place where it's furthest from. And, like, you're totally believing that. And I want that grittiness back. Like, when you stepped into Mos Eisley, it was a scum of a wretched hive of villainy, that you can't compare. And so I want that grittiness back. I don't want things to be polished. I want things to be dirty. I want them to be gritty. I want to look like the galaxy's been at war since the fall of the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. I want to see that. I want to see that grittiness.
And I think that everything that we've seen so far in trailers and set photos and different things is exactly what we're hoping for. A realism, they're in the sand, they're running, they're sweating, they're getting fired at, they're damaged. I think that's going to be an awesome thing to see. From these characters, and then just getting the callback to the Harrison Fords and the Mark Hamills and the Carrie Fishers is sort of like the little because you're just excited knowing that here comes what you're used to and what you know, and in a sense we're going to be able to just kind of forget the prequels because when and where this movie is taking place. So pretty stoked. Like they're obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but I mean here we are in August, or no, we're in September, so we've got a few months and it's going to be here, and I just cannot wait.
What is your biggest fear for episode 7? Like, what are you afraid of the most?
For one, it's gonna sound lame. It just popped in my head, but I don't want them to try to go too big, too fast, because I don't want this to be just one movie and done. I want this to be a movie that opens up the possibilities to make more movies, the way that A New Hope did, and I think that that's what they're going to do. But everything you sort of see about it. Maybe it's just because we don't know what they're going to do with the story. I just hope that what they do is that they open us up to these characters. And honestly, my biggest fear, I don't want them to kill off any of the original characters. If they have to go somewhere or fly away and do something else, that's fine. But if they kill Chewbacca or if they kill Han Solo, I'm going to be emotionally scarred for 2016. Like, I won't be able to be normal, and there's no telling what I'm going to turn to if I lose one of these characters.
Hopefully Jesus. Hopefully you turn to Jesus. Chewbacca's already dead, by the way. Just to let you know, he got a moon crush him.
Well, see, you say that, but then I just saw him on a trailer, so
well,
he seemed pretty okay to me.
He's dead.
Chewie, we're home.
He's dead.
Is what Han said.
That's right. They made it to heaven. Both of them are dead.
They're both in heaven. Okay. Yeah.
And the Millennium Falcon's there, so the Millennium Falcon's gone. That's what happened. My greatest fear is that there's going to be too much of a nod to the original trilogy. I want to see Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and the original cast and crew kind of transition into new heroes. And another fear I have is that what was really horrible, one of the bad things that people overlook about the prequels, not the original trilogy, but the prequels, is that they switched villains every single episode.
Oh yeah.
When you had the original trilogy, the bad guy, even to a point, is Darth Vader. Like, he is the central point. Even after you get to the end of Empire and you figure out, spoiler alert, that he's Luke's father, you still feel like he's a threat, and he's
right.
the bad guy. Prequels don't have any of that. They switch. You know, it's Darth Maul in Episode 1, it's Count Dooku in Episode 2, and it's General Grievous in Episode 3.
Yeah.
And so I don't want that to happen, and that's probably one of my fears.
Which I think that's why they've introduced this Kylo Ren character. I think that's his name. To try to go ahead and set up, like, there's this bad guy. He's on a hunt. He's, dark and shadowy. We don't know what's going to happen. So, I'm pretty excited. I think that something, and we've talked about this, we can go ahead and dive into this real quick as we're winding this thing down, is that, I think that most fanboys would agree that when creation happened and we saw episodes 4, 5, and 6, it was a beautiful thing. It was an awesome thing. It was an exciting thing, and dare I say, a perfect thing. Everything about it we enjoyed, and even the things that we didn't enjoy, or the takeaways that we got, they're still fun experiences. And like you even stated a while ago, there's 3 of us, and each 3 of us liked a different one the best. And so that goes to say something about how great those movies are. When the prequels were introduced, everyone had all of these hopes, but instead kind of what took place was a fall. And so we had this perfect world, and we loved it. Well, then it really fell on hard times, and there was a sense of disgust and a sense of distrust, and we didn't know what to do, and why are they doing this with this perfect world? And I think what Episode 7 offers is, as I said a while ago, is a chance for redemption, to follow the biblical model of storytelling. Is what we're really getting offered here is a moment of redemption, a moment of, hey, let's let someone step in and make things the way that they should be. And I think that's a beautiful picture of not only, 1, the gospel, but 2, the fact that all of us nerd guys and girls around can go to this movie with high hopes that we're going to be, affirmed in these dreams that we're having. So I'm pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked for that, for sure.
And just winding this down, and I know that we've kind of spent a little bit more time than we intended to, but that's a good thing. We had a good conversation today.
Yeah.
Just to remind you guys that anything that's in your life that could be considered a prequel, anything that could be considered a letdown, or how things didn't operate the way they were supposed to be, or maybe you didn't operate how you were supposed to, always remember that there is a J.J. Abrams, there is a Disney that's offering a new hope and a new way of doing things, and that's Jesus Christ. And I think that's the most important thing to remember, regardless of what your views on Star Wars or prequels or original trilogy or Star Trek or anything else, is that in the end, we're all kind of lost in our own prequel. We're all kind of lost in our own sin and our own screw-ups. And there is redemption, though. There is a possibility of redemption through Jesus. And so I think that's an awesome thing to think of, that always there's a chance to being redeemed, regardless of how bad we mess up or how bad there's always a chance of redemption. And we should offer that chance of redemption to other people that may have hurt us or harmed us. And so with that being said, I think we're about to sign off on our first podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you come back for more. Please, constructive criticism.
Words are hard.
Yeah, words are hard. And so, Joey, do you have anything else to add before we sign off?
No, this has been fun. I hope that, despite anyone listening to it or not, we'll record a few more of these conversations and just see where it goes.
Yeah, and we love you guys, even though we don't know you. We pray that everything goes well in your life and that Jesus is blessing you.
Definitely.
And we will see you next time at the Nerdom of God.